We begin the day with a high-stakes chase on the high seas. For more than 2 weeks, the U.S. has been pursuing an oil tanker across the Atlantic Ocean. Today, it seized the Russian-flagged vessel in the North Atlantic, risking a confrontation with Moscow. The U.S. Coast Guard initially tried to board the tanker in the Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela last month. When that attempt failed, the ship changed course and registered as a Russian vessel. Russia filed a formal diplomatic request asking the U.S. not to seize the ship. Reports say that Moscow also dispatched naval forces to protect it. But it appears those measures did not deter the Trump administration, which says the tanker was being used to evade U.S. sanctions. I'm joined now by Elisabeth Braw. She's from the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative. Elisabeth, it's good to have you back on the program. You know, we were following in real time today as U.S. forces intercepted that Russian-flagged oil tanker, and it seemed to, touch and go there for a while. This looks like a clear escalation between Washington and Moscow following last week's events in Venezuela. How significant is this naval interdiction?
It is an extraordinary turn of events. Shadow vessels have been around for a long time, and sometimes the coastal state inspects a shadow vessel that sails through its territorial waters or its exclusive economic zone. But this was a chase through the Atlantic, and it involved not just a shadow vessel, but a shadow vessel that reflagged to Russia, America's main adversary, I think, in the middle of the Atlantic, on its journey through the Atlantic. And that raised the stakes because it was assumed that America would then not try to board this shadow vessel because it was had become Russian flagged. America boarded anyway, and Russia decided not to intervene.
And why do you think Washington went ahead and seized this vessel, despite, as you pointed out, Moscow warning that it's now a Russian-flagged vehicle and basically that it's off limits?
That is the mystery. So this vessel had left Venezuela some time ago. The U.S. Coast Guard tried to board it off the coast of Venezuela, failed, and because this vessel, the Bella One, as it was then known, now it's called the Marinera, managed to get away. So one wonders why it was so important for the U.S. to board this vessel, because it is a shadow vessel. It's a shadow tanker. It had no oil on board. So
are we sure of that?
Rumors
Elisabeth?
are flying, circulating.
Are we sure of that there was nothing on board, no cargo?
We are sure there was no oil on board, but rumors are circulating about what else might have been on board, because it seems strange that the U.S. would go to such lengths to board an empty shadow tanker. It could be because it was of symbolic importance for the U.S. to be able to finally board this vessel after having initially failed, or it could be that there is something on board. We don't know, and I doubt we'll ever find out.
You know, ahead of this operation, the U.S. moved military aircraft to the U.K. Tell us more about the logistics of seizing this ship in the North Atlantic.
This is not just any boarding of a vessel. It is, as you said, in the middle of the Atlantic. Typically, boarding of a vessel takes place in the country's territorial waters, that is just outside its or off its coast, or in the exclusive economic zone, which are the waters immediately adjacent to the territorial waters. This was in the middle of the Atlantic, very far from U.S. territorial waters or the U.S. exclusive economic zone. So it was legally, let's say, more adventurous than traditional boardings, and it was also logistically a lot more complicated, because if you're not near your coast, then you have a lot more logistical hurdles to clear, getting your vessels to where they need to be, and also, as we know, bringing accompanying aircraft, and not least doing the actual boarding in the middle of an ocean. But it was successful on this occasion. And
when we're talking about Russia's shadow fleet, tell us, Elisabeth, more about vessels like this one. I mean, how are they used by Russia?
The shadow fleet has been around for a long time. It's not an established fleet whose vessels are on a government list somewhere. It's vessels that sail in some fashion outside the official shipping system because they transport cargo that is sanctioned by either some countries or by the community of nations. So South Africa, back in the days of apartheid, used shadow vessels. Venezuela has used shadow vessels for a long time. But the quantum leap for the shadow fleet was when Russia joined it, when the West imposed sanctions on Russian oil. So these vessels shuttle around the world, bringing sanctioned cargo from countries that are under sanctions to their customers. And what the United States tried to do with regard to Venezuela was block its shadow tankers from bringing Venezuelan oil to Venezuela's customers. And the U.S. Coast Guard managed to seize a couple of tankers, failed to board the Bella One, which is when this chase across the Atlantic began.
You know, Donald Trump's critics, they claim that he is much too sympathetic to Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin's foreign policy agenda. Does what we saw today, does this mark a turning point in how the Trump administration deals with Russia, do you think?
It seems to. So this is really the first serious confrontation, or would-be confrontation we have had between the United States and Russia in some months. It was notable that Russia felt strongly about this shadow vessel, the Bella One, that then changed names. It felt so strongly about trying to protect this vessel, perhaps as a gesture of solidarity with Venezuela, that it's agreed to have the Bella One reflagged to Russia. And that lent it, everybody assumed, some degree of protection by Russia. And that's clearly what Russia thought too. And we were all watching closely as the Bella One, then Marinera, made its way across the Atlantic to see whether the Americans really would dare to board a vessel that was now flagged by Russia. And that's what they ultimately did. But it could have led to a standoff because the Russians could have responded. They had vessels nearby.
Well, what kind of response should we be expecting now from Russia, if any?
I think what this will lead to is increased risk for Western-linked shipping. So U.S.-flagged ships, U.S.-owned ships, ships transporting cargo to and from the U.S. And we should remember the United States depends on shipping for about 70% of the goods coming into the country and leaving the country. So shipping is crucial to the United States. And the thing about shipping is that there is no global maritime police. Shipping depends on countries doing the right thing. And so now, with the United States having taken this step, other countries can say, well, we want to retaliate against the U.S. We want to make a point. And U.S.-flagged or U.S.-owned ships are perfect targets for such operations, especially since they have to sail through the waters or near countries that are not particularly friendly with the United States.
Yeah, we will see what happens on the high seas after today's events, that is for sure. Elisabeth Braw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. Elisabeth, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.